to everyone, especially you, Doa, and Benjamin and Birgül. It's an honor to be here, actually, and I'm frankly very excited to tell you about the human evolution in general. I will try to be as brief and simple as possible, considering not everyone is familiar with the topic, which is a very huge and complex topic. But when it's about human evolution, we always have some fears and misunderstandings. So I will start with this figure, which is called the March of Progress, and it's actually published in Clark Howell's book in 1965, if I recall correctly. And their intention was not actually try to explain the human evolution as a lineage, as a linear process, but the media and the popularity of this image and the openness of discussion of human evolution to everyone, because it's also a religious and ideological topic. So it made all of them actually made this image very controversial. But I have to say that this is wrong, because evolution is not a linear process. It actually looks like this if we consider all the living organisms, including humans, and all the mammals, plants, fungi, archaea, and everything. Evolution is a very complex process, and the image of evolution is actually the bunch of branches together. So I will speak about Pliocene and Pleistocene here for the geological stratigraphical timeline. And I will talk about primates and hominins, lithic tools, important Homo species, where they were found, basic material culture artifacts, basic symbolic finds. Why? Because we have to take a holistic look to understand human evolution, since humans are primates and primates are animals. And we have to understand the general chronological dispersion and origin of cultural practices. And with all these information, we can connect all of them with biocultural human evolution in general. So it's not only a biological process, it's also a cultural process, especially when humans, the modern humans, anatomically modern humans are involved. So where are we in biological classification? We are primates, just as I said before. And what are primates? To give a summary of primates and some morphological and social traits of primates. They have bigger brains than other mammals in body-brain ratio. They have more developed vision than olfaction, which is smelling, the ability to smell. We see colored, three-dimensional with a binocular vision. We have grasping and opposable fingers and toes. Primates also have nails instead of claws. They need relatively longer time to reach the adolescence. We give birth to less babies, but we spend considerable amount of time for their nurture and development. And we also have relatively more complex social structures. And when we look at the general biological taxonomy, we see there are 8 main steps from domain to genus, and we are actually Homo sapiens on genus and species level. And Charles Darwin is here as an example of a anatomically and cognitively modern human. When we look at our special place, not special because of we are special, I mean the focused place, we see ourselves in the hominoid superfamily, hominid family, hominin subfamily, Hominini tribe, and as I said, Homo and Homo sapiens. And you can see that we share very close ancestral relations with chimpanzees and bonobos, gorillas, orangutans, and also gibbons, which also includes many different, almost 20 species. For the hominins, we have actually 4 main traits, and the first one is bipedalism. And it's actually, sorry, It's one of the most important traits that we have, walking upright. We also have relatively bigger brains. Our teeth and teeth size is decreased, and our jaw size also decreased. And we make tools and use tools, and they actually co-evolved in different times as a mosaic evolution. So none of them actually comes before the other one or comes after the other one. They are all connected to each other. Who were or are the hominids, since we are also still living, and where and when were they? They're in Africa, as you all know, especially on the eastern side and the southern side. So on the left side, you can see a Y-shaped yellow image or figure, which indicates the Rift Valley. Rift Valley is important, as you can see also here, because it actually creates a microclimate that is very suitable for the hominins and other animals to actually have a different niche and different ecology compared to the general African climate. It comprises of valleys and rock shelters and water sources to live easily compared to other African parts. And also in the southern side of Africa, we have a lot of caves and karstic structures that are also very suitable for shelter, security, and living. We can actually divide the human evolution starting from 7 million years until now into 3 different parts. One of them is pre-Australopiths, the other part is Australopith, and the other ones are Homo genus. And I will start with the pre-Australopiths. I don't want to tell you all about them, of course, because of the time constraints, and the scope of this presentation doesn't include everything, but I will not pronounce the names. They're very confusing. But on the left side, we can see the first disputed hominin fossil. It's still discussed and argued if Sahelanthropus chidensis is the real first hominin. But the important thing is it is found in Central Africa, which is kind of unexpected because, as I told you just now, we mostly see our hominin fossils on the East African side and the South African side. But you can see we have very different kinds of fossils, from postcranial and cranial to jaw and teeth, and a very big range of different fossil finds. I will summarize them in a slide, so don't worry. But you can see that we started from 7 million years, and we came to 2 million and even 1 million years ago, which is a very long time, almost 5 million years. So we can see that there are many different hominins living sometimes in the same region and mostly in the same timeline. Australopithecus afarensis is one of the most important finds that we have about hominins, because maybe you may have heard of Lucy, which is a great, almost complete skeleton, not almost, but pretty much complete, to actually infer how it lived between 4 and 3 million years in East Africa. Why is afarensis important? Because we have footprints from 3.6 million years ago from Laetoli, Tanzania. And you can see on the left side, you can see the footprint, and the thumb is actually still very much separated from the other toes. On the right side, you can see an image from a recent publication, which analyzed the depth and the pressure strength of the footprints, and we can actually calculate how big were these hominins, and also how they walked. And they pretty much walked just like us, not necessarily as always, but they walked upright pretty good. But they were also still adapted to the tree living. And also we found around 3.3 million years ago, we find the first stone tools. They're called Lomekwian stone tools. And why are they important? Because they're older than the oldest known Aldovan tools, around 700,000 years, and they are older than the oldest found Homo fossil, around 500,000 years. And this is very important because normally in 60s or 70s, the term man the tool maker was coined by Louis Leakey. That means what we call human is the primates that are actually able to produce and use stone tools. But here we see before Homo fossils even found, or because Homo appeared in the human evolutionary timeline, there were already stone tools. So humans are not the only ones that made and used stone tools. So as a summary of this part, we can see that they lived between 7 to 2 million years ago, which is, as I said, a huge time range. There were multiple species at the same time and the same place. There were same genera at different regions. We started to see first signs of bipedalism and the possible first signs of tool use. Who were the members of Homo then? Our own genus. And what did they do? We start with the oldest known Homo fossil. We don't know the species yet, but we know that the genus is Homo, and it came from 2.8 million years ago from East Africa. Then we start to see Homo habilis or Homo rudolfensis, and we also start to see the first accepted Oldowan industry stone tools, and they start to appear in our timeline around 2.6 million years ago, and they were used for almost a million years or even more, even longer. Then we start to see Homo ergaster or Homo erectus, and they lived almost 2 million years, which is a huge timeline. And we first start to see hominins outside of Africa with the migration of Homo erectus outside of Africa, and they use different migration routes to spread and to disperse around the globe. And we also start to see a Swabian industry around 1.7 million years ago, and they were used until around 130,000 years ago. And what's important here is that you can see that they're more elegant, so to say. They're not just like Oldowan stone tools, and they are actually focused on they are used for specific practices, not only for breaking bones and other things. Here is a depiction of how they might have used stone tools as a group, and this image depicts a hunting ground and also a scavenging ground with different age groups. And also we start to see the first evidence for fire use, which is a very important aspect of human evolution. We start to see the first use of fire around 1.4 million years ago in East Africa, but the oldest controlled fire use in Wonderwerk cave at 1 million years ago in South Africa. We also found some evidence in Levant in Israel around 800,000 years ago, and also going very further to east, we can see controlled fire use in China in Chukutian cave around 600,000 and 300,000 years ago. As I said, Homo erectus was the first hominin to go out of Africa, and we can see a lot of different places, a lot of different fossils around the globe. And you might have noticed that there is no America for now, because we migrate to America around 20,000 years ago. We also have other footprints belonging to Homo erectus, not to Australopithecus, from Kenya Ileret at around 1.5 million years ago. They consist of 97 male individuals, and this actually was interpreted as multiple male hunter-gatherers going to hunting or scavenging or gathering together as a group. And we can deduce that they were actually living communally as a group, and they were very organized. You can see the difference between two different footprints of Australopithecus and Homo erectus, and there are almost 2 million years ago between them. But you can clearly see the morphological structure of different of the footprints and the toes and the pressure strength of the footprints. We also have one Homo erectus in Anatolia, in Turkey, fortunately, and Ahmet Sanaytek will the one who will present after me actually wrote his master thesis on Kocabaş Homo erectus. Maybe if you have any questions, you can ask directly to him, since he knows more than me about this topic. And they are the oldest known hominin in Turkey and the first and only known Homo erectus so far. I hope we can find more in the future. We also find Homo erectus in Georgia, very close to Anatolia, at around 1.7 million years ago, with thousands of Oldowan tools, not Acheulean tools, which shows that they were still using their old technology. It's important because they're outside of Africa and we can deduce their migration routes. They probably used Caucasus Mountains and also Anatolian shoreline to go into Europe and to Asia. We also see Homo antecessor in Europe around 1.2 million years ago, and we start to see the first cannibalistic behavior. And how do we know that? We know that because of the striations and stone tool traces on human bones, which means human must have made those cuts on the other human bones. We don't know if it's for feeding purposes or if it's a ritualistic behavior. We still don't really know that. We also start to see Homo heidelbergensis. I put a little question mark after it because heidelbergensis is a very disputed and argued and discussed species in human evolution, but I won't go into details. But we know that they, at around 780,000 years ago, and until maybe 100,000 years ago, they use shelter and fire, and you can see a depiction of the Terra Amata shelter in France. And you can also see that Europe was a little bit different than it is now. You can see a lot of different animals and huge jungle-like forests. But we know that they were still living in groups and they were cooperating for daily life activities. There's another depiction of horse butchering site in England in Buckscrow, which also shows that they are living together and not in a very small group. It was considerably big. And we can also see heidelbergensis footprints around 700,000 years ago in Ethiopia, and they were adults and infants living together, working together. We have Homo neanderthalensis also, which is very famous, and maybe you also might have heard of it. And they're actually not very different from us, considering their morphology and also their cognitive and symbolic behaviors. They used the Mousterian industry around 200 years to 40,000 years ago. There are also very specialized stone tools used for different kinds of activities, for punching a hole, for scraping. And they used a special technique called levallois for the pre-touching of the stone tool, which is very important because how you make the stone tool actually kind of shows how you plan ahead of what you're going to do. So levallois technique is special because they actually don't just snap the stone tool and get the flakes. They were actually planning before how, what kind of a tool they wanted to make. So it actually shows their cognitive abilities. And there's another example for a point. And also there were studies on hand bones of Neanderthals and their muscle insertion areas. And it shows they have precision gripping in Neanderthals as well as in humans, which is an important evidence supporting the behavioral and cognitive complexity. They were very good at using their hands and fingers and how they can grasp things. We also start to see the burial costumes. We see grave goods, ochres, and most possibly pollens. We can see a graveyard in France and also in Israel, in Shanidar, and also another one in Israel, a child buried with deer antlers. And we also see elderly care and cooperation in Neanderthals. And how do we know that? Because at Shanidar in Iraq, there is this Shanidar 1 individual, which is a very old-aged male, and he had many traumas in his ear, in his eye. He was probably deaf and blind, at least in one eye, and also he had very worn out teeth, which actually prevents him from digesting the food that he took. And he also had an atrophied humerus, an arm bone, which means he wasn't able to use one of his arms at an old age with worn out teeth and while being deaf and blind. So people in his group must have cared for him, which shows cooperation in Neanderthals was actually a very important aspect of their social life and social behavior. We also see hand and footprints of Neanderthals in France around 800,000 years ago. There were more than 250 footprints. And they calculated that they must have been 10 to 13 individuals of mostly children and adolescents. And they were also animal prints, so they were living together. Regarding their speech abilities, we still don't know exactly if they have spoken just like us. They had used language as a communication means, but their hyoid bones, which is located under the chin, under the tongue, is actually pretty similar to what we found in humans. And they also, in their genetics, they have this FOXP2 gene, which implies speech, controlled breathing, and mimics. But this gene was studied more further in recent years, and researchers say that this doesn't necessarily mean that they spoke just like us. But considering all the symbolic behavior and social complexity of Neanderthals, we can say that they must have had a basic or maybe even complicated language abilities, because they also use ornamentations and they probably made music, which I will come to in a second. There are also traces on their teeth implying right-handedness, which implies brain laterality, and this is an assumption for ability to speak, because brain laterality is actually connected to the cognitive abilities of humans. And we also find some tree bark fibers on their stone tool in France around 50,000 to 40,000 years ago. These are micro scan images, which implies they were aware of their environmental surroundings, and they were also using different kinds of organic remains to make probably ropes, cloths, nets, and bags, and etc. There were also some evidence, quote unquote, evidence about figurative art and music. This Babe flute was found in Slovenia around 60 to 50,000 years ago. They also used ochre to make parietal art, the cave art, around 64,000 years ago. This is important because Homo sapiens was not in Europe by that time. So Neanderthals must have been doing this kind of activities, the symbolic and cognitive activities, even before they were met with Homo sapiens. There were also deer phalanx carvings at Einhornhöhle cave in Germany around 51,000 years ago, and this also implies some symbolic interpretation and their ability to conceptualize and imaginize things. There were also digging sticks made of boxwood in Italy around 170,000 years ago, which were intentionally hardened by burning, which shows a goal-oriented material choice, and also the choice of technique, which also shows, which implies developed cognition. Actually, the digging sticks were used for collecting different kinds of plants under the soil. And they also made interesting circular structures from hundreds of stalagmites in France. And this place is very deep down, almost 350 meters. And this is from 176,000 years ago. And it showed regional traces for fire use, but this is still being discussed if it shows an important cognitive behavior or not. We also have Denisovans for the last 10 years or 15 years maybe. They're very important because they actually changed our perspective on human evolution and the relationship between Homo sapiens and Neanderthals. So we always said we were pretty much cousins with Neanderthals, and we were very close together until the Denisovans were found, because Denisovans are actually much more closer to Neanderthals than they are to us. And their genetic contribution to us is changing between 3 to 7, maybe 10% in our gene pool. And we can see that there are interbreeding occasions between modern humans, Neanderthals, Denisovans, and probably Homo erectus. We can see the genetic traces. Also, there are different kinds of studies to create the phenotypic appearance of how the Denisovans were. And we see Homo naledi. They found this fossil around 6-7 years ago in almost perfect shape, in a very deep and hard to the Denisovan cave is actually very hard to reach, and it's actually a cave system, and it's comprised of thousands of human Homo fossils. I can explain a lot of different Homo species to you, but it will take a lot of time and a lot of discussion. So I will just fast forward to Homo sapiens, and you can see the range of morphology of Homo sapiens from all around the world. And you can see my family as the anatomically modern humans and also a Neanderthal couple. What makes us anatomically modern is the reduction in our body structure regarding robustness. We have smaller body parts. We have our tooth very adapted to be smaller. Our craniums are globularized. Our faces are flattened. We have a real chin protrusion. Our brow ridges are disappeared, and we have less sexual dimorphism between genders, between sexes. And you can see, this image is not to scale, but you can see the difference in cranium and the face, and also the chin between Homo erectus, Neanderthals, and Homo sapiens. Homo sapiens actually appears around 3,000 years ago in North Africa, but we know that there must have been they must have evolved maybe earlier than this, and they use different migration routes to spread and disperse all around the world. We see a lot of different footprints in different parts of the world, which shows the animals and human connections and also the environmental use, because these footprints were actually found in a Paleolithic region, and we know that they probably visited the lake because of water needs and also in pursuit of animals and different subsistence strategies. There were also other footprints in Tanzania, which implies sexual division of labor and different routes to take going between places. In America, at White Sands National Park, in the United States, around 10,000 years, we see a very interesting footprint of a young female carrying a baby. And the researchers know that because of the pressure of the footprints, she was carrying a baby during some time, and then she was putting her or him to the ground and then take her again. And what are the essential events of brain evolution then? We have this hypothesis of triune brain, or the triple brain. It's the first one is the reptile brain, which controls essential reflexes, security, the sensations, stimulation control, and movement control. Then we have the limbic brain for essential emotions, bonding, motivation, interaction, satisfaction, and hidden memory. And neocortex for logic and reasoning, planning, commitment and empathy, thinking, and the faculty of language. In humans, we have around 86 billion neurons, and 16 billion of them are located in our cerebral cortex, and this is the highest number of neurons in all cerebral cortices. And if a rodent had 86 billion neurons, for example, a mice, it would be sized almost double as humans. And on the left side, you can see the brain development of a chimp in a temporal manner. And on the right side, you can see the brain development of a human. And you can see that the chimps at birth had a brain size around 150 cc's, and it increases until the age of 2, and then the curve flattens. But in humans, we are born almost double the size of a chimp baby, around 300 cc, and we have a rapid brain growth until 2 years of age, and then the brain growth slows, but it doesn't flattens until 6 to 7 years. So our brain development takes a lot of time. Why is that? Why the brain got bigger and bigger? It might be because of the bipedalism. It might be because of stone tool usage, or it might be because of symbolism. When you spread all this process to a geological timeline, or it might also be connected with cooking. There are many different hypotheses about those. I will just summarize the main hypothesis. The brain is actually only 2% of the body, while it spends almost 25%, 20% of the energy. So it uses 1/5 of all the energy that the human body takes. So it's a very expensive tissue, but this is a very bad thing for the evolutionary history of humans. So to compensate that, the human body got smaller while the brain gets bigger, and it actually equalizes the energy need of different organs. Other hypothesis is environmental complexity, and when we look at the environmental data, when the climate fluctuates at a great level, we also see brain size increases. So it's actually connected or related to the environmental fluctuations. So the brain has had to adapt to very different kinds of climates and ecological regions, because we were not living in Africa only, we were spread all over the world. Another hypothesis is the reduction in jaw size. In the middle, you can see a gorilla skull, and you can on top of the skull, you can see the sagittal crest, the blade-like bone structures. It houses all the masticatory or the chewing muscles. On the right side, you can see a human skull, which doesn't have the sagittal crest, but our temporal and parietal bones are actually very big compared to other primates, which actually helps the muscles to stick to. And because of that, our brain got bigger because it didn't have the stress of chewing muscles. Another hypothesis is a social brain hypothesis. We were living in a very social environment with almost 100 to 150 people in a group. So we have to discern every individual, and this makes our brain got bigger and bigger to understand all the social complexity and behavioral practices. What are the important events in our cognitive evolution, considering all this morphological and cognitive developments? Well, there are many, and we can see cognitive development or cognitive behavioral changes in, again, different parts of the world. Let's start with South Africa. At Blombos Cave, around 100,000 to 77,000 years ago, we find the oldest known symbolic artifacts, from drawings to little beads, and also fishing bone tools. And also we see different kind of cave art in Libya, India, Indonesia. And these are, for now, the oldest known artistic depictions in Indonesia, around 45,000 years ago. There are also hand and footprints in Tibet, and there are the oldest known traces around 200,000 years ago. And the researchers say this is a playground for children because all the footprints and handprints belong to children. So they were actually playing together. There are also different rock shelters and caves with artistic depictions in Australia. In Argentina, this is a beautiful image. Also in Malaga, Spain, we find some paintings around 40,000 years ago. And the researchers originally said they belong to Neanderthals, but it was also got very different, various comments. In Altamira, we find around 35,000 years ago, other cave arts, and this is a bone tool or an ivory tool to actually spit ochre onto the walls to create the images. This is the ceiling of Altamira. In Chauvet, in France, we see a tremendous amount of beautiful artistic imagery. This is also in France, Roca-Sorcière, around 45,000 years ago. Also, again, in the same place, we see carvings of probably vaginas or the imagery for females. Vulvas, sorry, not vaginas. In France, in Lascaux Cave, there are, again, beautiful depictions of animals. And there are these candles that you use for lightning in the caves. And there are also Venuses. These two, specifically Tantan and Bereketram, are disputed because they are very old, around 400,000 to 260,000 years ago. They might have been occurred or formed naturally, and they weren't probably depictions of humans or anthropomorphic figures. But the other ones in Germany, France, Czechia, Austria, Russian Federation, Switzerland, Slovakia, Italy, Austria again, there were many, many different Venus figurines. And there are many different discussions on why were they created. And the hypothesis actually includes even shamanistic hypothesis, hunting magic hypothesis. There are many different ideas of why they were carved out of stones. And we also start to see the therianthropic or anthropomorphic figurines from different parts of Europe around 30,000 years ago. We also have this Neanderthal flute in Slovenia. I have told you that before in the Neanderthal slides, and this is dated to Mousterian around 60,000 years, which is made out of baby bear femur. And if it's real, then this is the oldest known musical instrument in our history. But many researchers say the holes and traces on the bone might have been due to carnivore activity, but there are reconstructions of these flutes and even concerts with these flutes. And one of them was in Ankara 10 or 15 years ago. Actually, there was a concert with the reconstruction of this flute, and it's pretty much an instrument if you use it well, if you play it well. There are other Paleolithic musical instruments from Isteritz, from France, and also Swabian Jura flutes. And the University of Tübingen actually is working on those sites from Hohlefels, Vogelherden, Geisenklösterle. And there are also bull roarers, which are made of bone or woods. And when you turn them, it makes a sound with circular. When you turn them in a circular motion, they make a sound, and they are dated to 40,000 to 20,000 years ago, approximately. And it spans at least 4 different kind of cultural periods. There are also deer phalanx whistles, and the acoustic experiments showed they make sound to a range of 1.25 kilometers, and they may have been used for remote communication between different groups. And there are also organic and unfossilizable, I don't know if that's an English word, but unfossilizable materials like kelp. There are many different YouTube videos on this, and if you just cut the top and the bottom of it, and if you just blow through it, you can actually make music pretty easily. But they're not fossilized, so we're not sure if they have used all these organic materials. And cave art might actually be related to music production as well, because experimental research shows that the most complex images in the caves are located in places where the cave shows the best acoustic properties like echoes and resonance. And also echolocation in caves might have been used to find, because for example, on the right side, you can see Chauvet cave, which is a huge and deep cave with different chambers, dark chambers. So they might have used music to locate themselves in the cave. And as a summary to conclude, what should I take from all of these information? Well, it's hard to actually summarize a 7 million years evolution of humans, but you can say that evolution is a very complex process. So in order to understand it, we have to change our perspective from biological determinism into a more holistic approach to understand the whole evolution. And when we look at the evidence, we see that bipedalism, stone tool production, brain development, use of controlled fire, cognitive behaviors, use of language, and many other human features actually occurred and evolved into in a mosaic context. So it may be difficult to know how they have affected themselves So we don't know the cause and effect because they are actually very intercorrelated. And we must consider the time scale, 7 million years at least, in every instance, because without the understanding of timeline and geography, it's almost impossible to really understand how the humans have evolved. So I think that's all. And thank you very much for your time and patience. I'm very grateful for all of you to be here listening to me.